Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. Hello and welcome to UT Health House Calls presented by Mercedes-Benz Dealers of Greater Houston. My name is Ivan Krunig. I'm a general manager here at Mercedes-Benz of Houston North. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the third of 7 house calls hosted throughout the Houston area covering a range of health topics. We are proud to be partnering with UT Health to bring awareness to important health issues and the amazing work that has been done by healthcare educators, providers, and researchers at the university and its UT physician clinics. Thanks to this partnership, I'm proud to announce that Mercedes-Benz of Houston North will be giving 2 $5,000 scholarships to CISIC School of Nursing at UT Health. Thank you. Thank you. Tonight's program, the APCs of Back to Houston Health, Back to School Health, and in Houston, of course, is presented by Dr. Latanya Love, Associate Professor in the Department of Pediatrics at McGovern Medical School at UT Health. The Q&A portion of tonight's presentation will be moderated by Karen Kaplan, medical journalist and longtime member of the UT Health community. Before we get to the program, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce someone who helped make this partnership possible, Dr. Michael Yaffe. Dr. Michael Yaffe is the Director of Pediatrics Endocrinology and Associate Professor in the Department of Pediatrics at McGovern Medical School. He provides care for patients from birth through young adulthood, and he's been recognized as one of the Houston's top doctors by Houstonia magazine. He is something that we like to call a Mercedes-Benz of doctors. Thanks again for joining us tonight, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Yaffe. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, my dear friend Ivan. Thank you for this wonderful introduction. So today I wear 3 hats. I am the Division Director of Pediatric Endocrinology at UT Health. I am the presenter of your guest speaker, Dr. Love. And most important, at least for today, I am the official matchmaker between Mercedes-Benz and UT Health. It's a perfect match because both institutions take the phrase handling with care very seriously. At UT Health, we care for people at all ages, even before they are born, and then at every phase and stage of their life. Mercedes-Benz does the same. They care for their passengers in their cars, even for pedestrians outside the car, placing the highest value on quality and safety. Mercedes-Benz is the first company in history that started crashing their cars to test their safety. UT Health, along with UT physicians, remains one of the most sought after medical care facilities. We see patients from all over the world. Mercedes-Benz remains the most desired car in the world. In their factory in Stuttgart, they quote a story of a man who went to pick up his car after a European tour. He was so excited to pick up his car, seeing himself behind the wheels of his first Mercedes, that he drove off to the hotel forgetting his wife in the factory. So I don't think that I can create the same excitement tonight for you to forget things, but maybe Dr. Love will do. Dr. Love also wears many hats. She's an associate professor of pediatrics, associate dean of admission and student affairs for McGovern Medical School, and vice president for diversity and inclusion at UT Health. Please welcome Dr. Latanya Love.
Thank you so much to my good friend, Dr. Yaffe, and thank you so much to Ivan and the team here at Mercedes-Benz for welcoming us here. So my name, as Dr. Yaffe said, is Dr. Latanya Love. It really is Dr. Love, and I am not going to talk about relationship advice. Sometimes people think that's my specialty, my area of specialty, when they hear the name Dr. Love. But today we're going to talk a little bit about the ABCs of going back to school and what are some tips that you can help your children to have a successful school year. So basically we're going to talk about 5 things that I think are important to think about when you are preparing to get your children to go back to school, or for some of us who have already welcomed our children back to school to make sure that they have a successful year where they are thriving. So our first tip, and I think this is kind of the hardest, and that is routine. So getting your child back on their routine. I have to tell you, this is a tough one in my household. I have a 7th grader and a 5th grader who really love the summer because in the summers, like a lot of parents, we tend to be a little bit laxed with some of the sleeping rules. They go to sleep a little bit later than they do during the school year. They get to sleep in. They are living the good life. But we got to get them back on routine. So it is very important that your kids are getting at least 10 to 12 hours of sleep every night to make sure that they are feeling well rested, so that they are energized for the school day ahead. So you really want to make sure you're getting them back on their routine. And if your kids are struggling a little bit this week since they've gone back, you may even want to think about, even over the weekend, this may not be popular, but waking them up at the normal time that you would wake them up during the school year and making sure that they are following their bedtime. So getting them back on their routine. So the second thing that we always have to think about when we are getting our kids back into the swing of things is going to be a healthy and nutritious diet throughout the school year. It is so important that they get that nutritious brain fuel to make sure that they have energy and that they are alert when they are listening to their teachers. So this starts with breakfast. Breakfast really is one of the most important meals of the day, especially for children. And I will say a lot of the stuff that I'm saying for children, it's for us as parents and family members and adults as well too. So you have to make sure that they have a healthy breakfast. So I know that my kids, they love cereals that are very high in sugar and really not good for them. And they know that that is not going to make it in our household. So you really want to think about getting a little bit more protein in their breakfast, because protein is what's going to help them to feel fuller, so that when they get to school, they're not, distracted because their stomachs are growling after only being at school for an hour. Think about cereals that are higher in fiber. Those tend to be a little bit more nutritious for your children. Then when we're talking about nutrition, school lunches. Okay, so school lunches can be a challenge. Sometimes we make school lunches. There are going to be some kids that are going to be getting lunch through their cafeterias at school. So if your child is making lunches, I always encourage parents to make them a part of the meal planning. Make them part of helping you to make lunches, maybe making out a weekly calendar of what they're going to bring Monday through Friday for lunch. And I find that that is helpful, because if they're a part of it, they tend to eat it a little bit more. And so you really want to think about that. If you've got children that are buying or receiving school lunches, then you want to make sure that you look at the menu ahead of time. Schools are really good about either sending that out to parents or either, putting it on their website, because there are going to be some days, if your children are picky eaters like mine are, especially my 5th grader, there are going to be some days where they do not like what they are serving at school. So you want to be prepared for that. And the way you can do that is making sure you're kind of looking at those menus ahead of time. Then when we're talking about healthy food, you have to think about snacks, because the pediatricians, we love for your kids to be active. We don't want them to be couch potatoes. We want them to be active. So that means that a lot of kids are going to be doing things after school. They may be doing after school sports. They may have, music lessons or something else that they're doing after school. So you want to make sure that you're packing healthy snacks for those after-school activities. And if they're doing and participating in sports, make sure they stay hydrated, because we know that our summer is going to extend to our fall and winter. So you really want to make sure that your kids are hydrated, especially those that are participating in after-school sports. So that's my second tip. The third one, this one is tough, and I have to tell you something that is a challenge in my household, like it is in many, and that is putting a restriction on screen time, social media, smart devices. So there is something that I learned about really over this summer from my middle schooler, and that is a little game called Fortnite. Anybody else familiar with Fortnite? Fortnite, yes. Fortnite, it seems to be very, very popular among youth. But you really want to make sure that now that kids are back into school, you have got to restrict screen time. It is really important. I didn't say it was going to be easy, but you've got to do it. So what does that mean? So the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends for children that are ages 2 to 5 that you limit screen time to only 1 hour a day. And hopefully at that age that you are closely monitoring what your children are watching. If you have a child 6 and older, then what the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends is that the family and parents decide what are going to be the restrictions for that individual child. So as parents, as family members, as support teams, we got to make sure that we have restrictions and that our children are aware of them. We have to enforce them. Sometimes you got to be the bad cop as a parent. And then we have to make sure our children know that there are consequences if they do not follow those rules. So very important to restrict the screen time. Now, I will say this does not apply to a lot of children nowadays are going to have homework that requires the use of their computer or maybe a tablet. We're not talking about that because that's educational content. But what we are talking about is when they are doing all the fun stuff that they like to do, watching YouTube videos, playing video games, you know, texting with their friends. And, you know, you have to monitor that stuff that your kids are doing. All kinds of apps that can make sure you put some security restrictions on your younger children. So very important. So that's my third tip. My fourth tip is to really remember that when your children are going back to school, there are a lot of emotions that are going to be involved with going back to school, and there's going to be all kinds of emotions that can kind of happen throughout the school year. So in the beginning of school, you get some kids who are really excited and very happy to go back and to learn and to meet new friends and meet their new teacher. And then you have some kids that are very anxious about going back to school. They wonder if they're going to fit in. They might be starting a new school and you have to make new friends. They may be worried about the workload. Can I handle the homework? Will I do good this school year? So you want to make sure that you are checking in with your child on a regular basis. And I can tell you, you know, as I've said, I have an adolescent child who it gets harder to pull out how's school going, how are you doing, but you really want to keep the lines of communication open with your children. So I often find that instead of telling my children, you know, I want to see, you know, that you're on the honor roll. I want to see that you're making A's and B's, that you kind of ask them, well, what are you excited about this school year? What class do you think may be a little bit more challenging or that you're a little bit more worried about? So instead of just kind of forcing communication on them, you kind of just ask them questions and then you realize, oh my gosh, we've actually had a really good conversation. So this works really, really good with your adolescents and your teenagers. So make sure you are checking in with your child. During the school year, if you notice that the grades are starting to slip, that your child is a little not their self, their personalities are changing, you have to make sure that you figure out if there's something going on, if there's anything they want to talk about. Don't be afraid, you know, to communicate with the school if you are worried about your child and their behavior. Teachers sometimes spend more hours during the day than we do with our own kids. So a lot of times they can recognize too when there seems to be something wrong with your child. So make sure you are communicating on a regular basis with your children. Very, very important. So then my final tip, which I think is one of the more important ones, that is making sure that you are keeping your regular scheduled visits with your pediatrician, that you've done all your back to school visits. This is the time of year where you need sports physicals signed, and so this is a really good time to go to your pediatrician and talk with them about any concerns you have. We really want to know what your concerns are because it's a horrible feeling when you walk out the doctor's office and you're like, oh, I forgot to ask that question. And I find a lot of times that if one parent is in the room and they're the ones who were able to take the child to the clinic appointment, don't be afraid to call the other parent on the phone. This really happens a lot when it's the dad that brings the child. They're like, hold on, I got to get mom on the phone because if I don't ask this, she's going to kill me. So you want to make sure that all of your questions are answered. If that means, you know, writing down in your phone when you're thinking about something, jotting it down, come to your pediatrician's office. We want to hear from you. We really do. If your child has chronic conditions such as asthma, diabetes, food allergies, make sure you are working with your healthcare provider to fill out all the necessary paperwork that needs to be on file for the school nurse so that they know what to do in case of an emergency. It's always better to be prepared. If you need refills on medications, make sure you are getting that. And then if you also notice that your child is having some difficulty or their grades are dropping, talk with your pediatrician about that too, because there may be a further workup or other things that we can kind of look into and really try to come together as a team and figure out what is going on. So these are my 5 tips, just to recap them because I don't want you to forget about them. The first one, remember, routine is key. Kids really thrive and do well with routine. So get your kids back on that routine. We didn't say it was going to be easy, but get them back on the routine. If you fall off the bandwagon and you are not following the routine, just try again the next day. Second, healthy, nutritious lunches and meals, very important. Third, remember to restrict your screen time with your children. And fourth, make sure you are checking in with your child on a regular basis throughout the school year. Check and see how they're doing. And finally, don't forget to consult your healthcare provider, your pediatrician. We really do care about your child's health, and we really want to be a partner with you as you are navigating the journey of parenthood. So with that, I think we are going to open it up for some questions. And I'm going to look over here at Karen, who is moderating, and she is keeping an eye on what is coming in from our viewers at home.
And we do have several questions on snacks, which we'll get to shortly. But one of the first questions is, how many hours of sleep do teenagers really need?
Okay, so what they really need and what they think they need, those are 2 different questions. So certainly as they get older, they're not taking naps, hopefully, as our younger kids are doing. So what we really say is between 8 to 10 hours. I say, 9 to 10 hours would be great, but really if you look at research, it says minimum of 8.5 hours. So you really want to make sure your children are getting a full night's rest. And I do want to mention a little bit about sleep hygiene. So that is something that we really have to make sure that we're doing. So what does that mean? Making sure there's not a lot of distractions in their bedrooms, TVs, their cell phones, because if they can, they will text or they will play with the phone. So those are things that are not good for sleep hygiene. So sleep is very important. Great question.
Okay, this one involves one of my kids' neighborhood friends is homeschooled because they do not believe vaccines are safe. Should I be concerned for my children's health?
So I think we do have concerns when we have children that are not vaccinated in our community, because that could mean a potential outbreak for the community. And we do not want to see measles. These are not good diseases to have. So, we encourage parents that have questions or concerns about vaccines to really come and talk to your pediatrician and let us know. So when I have a parent that, thinks they're not sure if they want to do vaccines, a lot of times it's because they're misinformed. And I think that's one of our jobs as pediatricians, is to be educators. So we really try to educate our patients on the myths of, what kind of side effects you can get from vaccines, and really what the importance of vaccines for your child and for our community.
With in the news recently, as I'm sure your phone's been ringing off the hook, this question, I'm concerned about the recent reports on baby food and heavy metals. So if you could elaborate a bit on.
So that was a small study that was recently done. And so what you have to remember are that baby foods have to go through FDA. So what we do is we look for guidance through the FDA to make sure that the products we are giving our children are safe. So usually what I do is I'll follow their guidance. If they say that we should not be using these products, then I'll tell our patients we really should not. But it's understandable that parents are concerned because these are your children. So you don't want to, put anything in their mouth that could be potentially harmful. So you have to be careful. One thing I will say too is when you are packing school lunches, you're going to want to be careful about some of the containers that you're using. So we recommend that you're using BPA-free products. So even too when you're wrapping up leftovers at home, nowadays we are recommending that you use glass or stainless steel or options that say on the label BPA-free.
My 10-year-old came back with a high cholesterol count from the last visit with the pediatrician. I can't police what my kids eat outside of my home. What do I do, and is this dangerous? Is it reversible without medication?
So sometimes it depends on what the origin of the high cholesterol is, but one of the things that we are seeing in our society that lead to high cholesterol is a poor diet and obesity. So it is very hard to control sometimes what your kids are eating when they're not around you, but you can control the things that are in your house. And so really what you want to think about it as you are keeping your child healthy, you are also keeping yourself healthy so that you can be around for a long time to see those children grow up. So it is very tough. I do recommend that if your children spend time with other caregivers like grandparents or babysitters or neighbors, that you let them know what some of your concerns are. You let them know, you know, my child has high cholesterol, so we're really trying to monitor their food. I find if the grandparents know that the doctor says, so sometimes I even write notes to the grandmother. I'll say, this is from Dr. Love. You know, we have to really watch what we're eating. Another thing that I often do is I always print out the growth chart for parents to take home so that those family members who are not there or who may watch the child from time to time or perhaps may promote the not so healthier snacks, that they know that this is why we're concerned, because your child's BMI is greater than the 95th percentile. And we see this all too often. And one of the things that I love about pediatrics is that we have a chance to impact children before their really bad habits develop. It's a lot harder for us as adults, but it's a lot easier when they're children. So it's tough, but you really have to make sure those loved ones and those that are, you know, caregivers of your children, they kind of know what your concerns are with your children and your expectations.
In this hot weather, and you mentioned this earlier, with active kids, how do I know that my kids are really hydrated enough they never ask for water or juice?
Yes, kids will play all day and never stop for a water break. So one of the things that we use to monitor hydration is actually urinary output. So we are making sure your child is still going to the bathroom, that they're urinating. So those are good signs that they're hydrated. We know when they're sweating and they're out in the hot sun, they need more fluids. So you as a parent, you have to make sure that you are sending them with those water bottles. When they're outside playing, you make sure that they're taking breaks so that they can get water and that they can stay hydrated. It is very important. And, you know, a lot of coaches, they try to do a good job of not keeping the children out in the hot sun for too long. You know, they may have some drills and then they take a break, take water breaks, or they go inside. So it's very important. And even when school starts back in its fall, we still have the sun out here. So if your children's going to be outside playing sports and activities, practices, please put on their sunscreen. Very important.
Here is a question about cyberbullying. My daughter tells me that over the summer she has been cyberbullied by a group of girls from her school. But she has not, this did not occur on school property or during the school year. She has begged me not to talk to the school. If it isn't happening at school, how can I support her?
So I think you need to first check in on your child. How are you feeling about this? You want to make sure that this is, you know, that they understand that this is a problem and that you're here to support them. We are our children's biggest advocates. So if you are aware of a cyberbullying situation involving your child or another child, you know, if you're not sure where to start, I would still even go to the school because they may be able to speak with the parents. They may be able to assist you in getting to the bottom of where this is coming. If it's somebody that you happen to know, you know, reach out to the parents because I would want to know if that were my child. I think most of us would want to know if that was our child that was doing the bullying. It's not fun to hear that your child's doing that, but you would want to know because most of us do not condone that kind of behavior. So that is a tough one, but I think it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. And the reason is because social media is just all over the place. I can't even keep up with what the new apps are, you know, between Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. There's all kinds of things. And children definitely will, you know, we were all kids once before, and I can't even imagine what it would have been like, you know, growing up in this technology age. It's very difficult. So that is why I mentioned it is so important to keep those lines of communication open with your children and, you know, monitor who they're talking to. You're probably paying for the phone. Most of us are paying the phone bill. That's not your phone, that's my phone. So remember that. You own that phone, not them. You're just letting them borrow your phone. So you don't feel bad about scrolling through their text messages or monitoring who they're communicating with, just to make sure that they don't get themselves in a bad situation and make sure you kind of know what's going on in their world.
And this one comes in, my son is 8 years old and still has at least one nighttime accident. He sleeps so soundly he doesn't even wake up when I put a towel down or walk him to the toilet. He is not in the least bit bothered by this. No one seems to be, including the pediatrician, except me. Is this a problem?
So it depends. There's different reasons for bedwetting, but what I will tell you is nocturnal bedwetting. We see that a lot more common. So usually my advice when I have a patient who's having bedwetting at night, first, you need to restrict fluids at a certain time. So they should not be drinking anything close to bedtime, and you really should cut them off at least 2 hours before they're going to bed. Then you need to make sure that they're emptying their bladder before they go to bed. So that has to be part of the routine, like you tell them to brush your teeth, read a book, go to the bathroom. Make them go to the bathroom. Then we also recommend that you make them a part of the cleanup. So if the sheets are wet, then they need to help you pull those sheets off, get them in the washing machine, put new sheets on. They need to be a part of that process, you know, to understand about it. Most kids really do outgrow it. You want to make sure that they're not bedwetting because there's an infection or anything like that. So keep talking to your pediatrician about it. Sometimes we just want to wait and see what happens because some things do really resolve on their own with time, but you keep talking about it. If you are concerned, we are concerned. I promise you, even when it sometimes sounds like we're not, we really are. We're listening. Most of us are.
When is it appropriate to treat short children with growth hormone?
That is a great question for my friend Dr. Yaffe, the endocrinologist. This is right up his alley. So I'm going to turn it over to him.
Well, thank you, Dr. Love. You know, the interesting thing about growth hormone is to remember that growth hormone is not for everyone. Everyone would like to be taller. Kids like to be taller. It's good to be tall and big, especially in Texas. But again, you really need to make sure that you are going to give growth hormone to the right person. So you really need to have the right diagnosis. Growth hormone is also approved by FDA, like Dr. Love was talking about baby's food. Everything is controlled by FDA through certain indications. So you really not need to talk to your pediatrician or pediatric endocrinologist about the diagnosis. Does my kid have growth hormone deficiency? Does he have other possible conditions that would make him benefit from growth hormone? So bottom line, growth hormone is not for everyone. You need to have a correct diagnosis. Nothing comes without potential side effects, so you need to make sure that you use it wisely and monitor potential side effects.
Can type 2 diabetes be reversed? You're stuck here for a while. I have a few.
So type 2 diabetes, we are talking about the adult type of diabetes. Historically speaking, diabetes had type 1, which is autoimmune, happened only in kids, and type 2, which is adult type related to obesity, insulin resistance, happened only in adults. As we started seeing an epidemic of obesity in kids. We started seeing kids getting type 2 diabetes, which is the adult type. And in fact, 20 years ago, no one believed us as pediatric endocrinologists talking about this. It took the Pediatric Endocrine Society 2 years to convince the American Diabetes Association that we are seeing type 2 in kids. To answer your question correctly, yes, if the diagnosis is made early, if it has been associated with lifestyle modification, diet and exercise, losing weight, early treatment, yes, it can be reversed. And actually, I've published a case in 2015. It's the youngest case ever reported with type 2 diabetes. It was all in all international media of a girl who was 3.5. She was obese, came and made the diagnosis with type 2 diabetes. In fact, I had to put her on the liquid form of metformin. Right now, metformin, the most important medication for diabetes, comes in liquid form to treat kids. Sad, isn't it? So we put her on that. Mom was very upset, did excellent job about lifestyle modification, took her swimming, walking, modified the diet, and guess what? She's medication-free right now. So yes, it can be reversed.
My 9-year-old daughter is already in the throes of puberty, and none of her friends are. She's now saying she's too embarrassed to go to school. Should I take her to an endocrinologist?
So the issue with puberty is very complicated. It depends on many factors, personal factors in the body, how much fat does the kid have in the body, the family history, when did the mom start having her periods, when did she start entering puberty. And then there is something else called tempo of puberty. How fast are you advancing in puberty? So when you say person is in puberty, we need to know, is this the beginning of puberty? If the kid is advancing in puberty, could be the end of puberty. So the answer is yes. If this is bothering you, this is bothering her, you need to take her to the pediatrician first, make sure that they check her physically, do some tests, and maybe see a pediatric endocrinologist, knowing that sometimes it might be late to do something. And, you know, people have different tempos. People do not come, we don't all enter puberty or, you know, as kids, enter puberty in the right time and stop in the same time. Everyone is different. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, the earliest age for puberty in girls used to be 8. Right now, we accept 7. And keeps getting down, and we really don't know the answer to that.
2 more endocrine-related questions. My teenage daughter was recently diagnosed with possible polycystic ovary syndrome. Who treats this, and does it always mean infertility later in life? She does not want to see a gynecologist yet.
So this is also another disease that got transferred from adult endocrine to pediatric. Polycystic ovary syndrome is syndrome described many years ago by Stein-Leventhal, associated with infertility, was described because of infertility. But in fact, before this happens, you have many steps. You know, you might have abnormal periods, weight gain, insulin resistance, abnormal glucose tolerance. It has many aspects. So it does not necessarily mean that it ends in infertility. People get worried about that. I do understand the mom's concern about this. And you go back to the question of who treats that. It really depends on the component. If there is a hormonal component behind that, yes, there is, you know, a pediatric endocrinologist has to take over. It's more like gynecologic problem, then guess what? There are pediatric gynecologists for that reason. So I do understand why you don't want to take her to a gynecologist, but there are trained pediatric gynecologists that can deal with this problem.
Okay, thank you. One last question. There's been so much talk about gender confusion in young kids today. Does it have anything to do with their inherent hormone levels? And if so, can't they be tested for their levels of estrogen and testosterone?
Sure.
Or is this another issue?
Well, gender dysphoria is a topic that started surfacing a few years ago and created a lot of vibe about it in the society and among pediatricians, because simply speaking, we really don't know a lot about it. You know, When kids go through puberty, they go through many stages, and there is a normal stage in which a kid might say, a boy might say, oh, I really like how my mom, wears her perfume, or how she carries purses or high heels. I wish I were a girl. And we need to understand that's normal. But sometimes when it progresses and continues, then it might become abnormal. And the answer to the question is, most of the time it's psychological issues. Sometimes, yes, there is a hormonal component behind it, but most of the time it's a psychological rather than hormonal issue. So start with your pediatrician, talk to the pediatrician, and see if there is any need to send your kid to the pediatric endocrinologist. It's a very new topic. A lot of research is being conducted these days about this. It's a new topic even to the pediatricians.
Thank you. And I have a couple of more questions for Dr. Love.
Thank you.
Okay, are immunizations the same across all states? We just moved here from the Midwest and my kids are starting school in 2 weeks.
Most of the immunizations are the same, but there are some state laws which would make different requirements. So you're really going to make sure and you're going to keep hearing us say, talk to your pediatrician, because we do know what's required in our state and what the recommendations are. So most of the recommendations are the same, and they come from the CDC. So the majority are the same, but there are some state laws which may require something else.
And the last question is, what is the best app for controlling screen time for your kids?
I do not endorse any one particular app, so I think there are a whole lot of them out there. So I think you have to research that. Just know on the iPhones you can go to something called Usage, and you can see what apps and where your children are spending most of their time, whether it's texting, whether it's on the Safari, whether it's photos, camera, you can see that all the time, because my husband always complains that our middle schooler uses up more data than he and I combined. So you've got to monitor those things. So you just kind of have to research it. There's lots of different products out there.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Love.
Thank you.
Thank you for sending us back to school with all the right information for a successful start to the year for both kids, parents, and in my case, grandparents. And thank you, Dr. Yaffe, for wearing multiple hats this evening as pediatrician, endocrinologist, and certainly for making the introductions to our new friends and most generous hosts at Mercedes-Benz of Houston North. I'd also like to thank Dr. Asha Davidson, who is sitting to my right, for her diligent response to online questions that we have not had a chance to address tonight. And certainly a huge thank you goes to ABC 13 and ABC13.com for giving us this platform to supply our Houston community with the knowledge and awareness regarding our health. I'd also like to extend our gratitude to UT physicians, our partners in health, our clinical faculty from McGovern Medical School at UT Health, who teach and train and treat and provide the highest quality care for your entire family. Some of our UT physicians and staff are with us tonight. You've heard from 2 of them to provide more information on our clinics and services, so please stop by their table there and see them, or visit utphysicians.com. Tonight was the 3rd of 7 UT Health House calls. Our next one will cover spine conditions and back pain and the aging back on Thursday, September 6th at Mercedes-Benz of Sugar Land. For more information about UT Health House calls, please visit the Health Check section on abc13.com. This portion this evening will be up for several days, so you can look at some of the questions if you'd like and be able to view the speakers again. And please feel free to our live audience here to stick around and come up with as many questions as you can. We don't want to let Dr. Yaffe and Dr. Love go quite yet. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you next time.